Hello, and welcome to today's presentation. Today's presentation is developing community-appropriate educational tools for your EWB-USA project. One of the most important aspects of a sustainable project and program is providing educational tools to your local community partners to enhance capacity building, knowledge transfer, and behavior change. This presentation is intended to guide chapters and members on various types of community-appropriate educational tools, how to develop those, and when chapters should be providing educational tools throughout the overall project process at EWB-USA. So before we begin, let's review the mission and vision of EWB-USA. Our mission, Engineers Without Borders USA, builds a better world through engineering projects that empower communities to meet their basic human needs and equip leaders to solve the world's most pressing challenges. Our vision is a world in which every community has the capacity to sustainably meet their basic human needs. As we all know, EWB-USA's mission is based on real relationships by committing to 5-year partnerships with our communities. Our goal is to create long-term sustainable solutions for the communities that we are partnering with. We want to do more than just build latrines for a community. We want to equip them to build and maintain the latrines themselves, which ensures that the community will have sanitation solutions long after our 5-year commitment is fulfilled. So the word sustainability has become such a catchphrase for different entities that it's risky to emphasize it without first defining it from the perspective of our organizational mission and vision. So in our work, when we talk about sustainability, there are several things we're talking about. We always want to make sure that harm isn't done to the environment as a result of our implementation. We want the design to be socially acceptable and appropriate for all members in the community. The projects that we implement are to be affordable for the community to operate and maintain into the future. And in order to maintain the project, we want to make sure that the technical know-how exists in the community to keep the project operational. If we've taken these factors into account when we design the project, we have a better chance of the project meeting the needs of the community and being sustained into the future. Our goal is to make sure we've done what we can to design products that work for our partner communities now and in the long term. So sustainability within EWB-USA is the capacity of a project to endure. This definition emphasizes the need for our partner communities to have the capacity to sustain the project into the future in the context of development work. Consider the likelihood that the project will still be meeting the needs of the community in 10, 20, or 30 plus years. So as we described on the previous slide, sustainability in a very broad sense within the context of EWB-USA is the capacity of a project to endure. As we saw, sustainability includes economic, environmental, and social factors, but encompassed within all of these is education. So here I wanted to share the definitions of both education and empower with the audience. So education, the process of receiving or giving systematic instruction or information about or training in a particular field or subject. And when we talk about empowering, we're talking about enabling someone or promoting the self-actualization or influence of. So empowerment of the community should be integrated into every step of our partnerships, from the initial identification of needs to a joint discussion of potential solutions, to a side-by-side implementation of the best solutions. These ideas, conversations, and plans take place over our 5-year commitment. Local sourcing of materials, extensive education trainings, and carefully crafted O&M manuals ensure that communities are equipped to manage their projects long after EWB-USA's final monitoring and evaluation trip. Now that we've established the importance of education and empowerment to the overall sustainability of a project, let's turn our focus on how to effectively incorporate education into every phase of your project. So when we talk about education needs, what are we actually talking about? Some examples of education needs are listed here, as you can see. The most, I think, obvious one, and the one that we tend to think about first, is the Operation and Maintenance Manual. In addition, I see a lot of chapters focus on water, sanitation, and hygiene. Education can be incorporated into your data collection, construction techniques, water conservation, and water treatment. So we'll talk about these in more detail, but before, I would like to emphasize two things about education. And these are, the first is you don't want to make any assumptions on what the community knows or doesn't know. You want to get your partners involved with identifying educational needs. And so an example of this is a chapter assuming that women want to spend less time collecting water in their communities, when in reality perhaps those women actually highly value that time that's spent at the communal water collection point as a social aspect to their lives. So we don't want to make assumptions about what they know and what they don't know and what their needs are. We don't want to make assumptions about their resources either. You know, oftentimes I read chapters writing that, you know, the communities are the poorest of the poor, when in reality, you know, maybe the community members can actually buy a bottle of Coke every day. So they're not, they do have some resources. And then the second one is try to establish a train-the-trainer approach so that the content can be repeated over the long term. So you want to try to focus on training multiple people in the community, try to target different sectors of the community, for instance, women or children or teachers or health promoters. Those are all very different audiences, and trying to take a holistic approach to your educational work is really important. So now I want to just go quickly over our current project process here at EWB-USA headquarters. So I'd like to just go through and talk about where we think it's appropriate and important to include education for our community partners. So this is just the flow chart that was developed, and as you can see, our project process really follows standard engineering methodology. So we have at the top the 501, where the community is applying to be adopted, and the 502, where the chapter is adopting the program. And then after that, we move into assessment. And typically this can last anywhere from 6 months to 2 years after the 501 is approved for the community. And this is where we're gathering all of the information, confirming the needs of the community, establishing our relationships, looking at material sources, just doing a holistic assessment. And sometimes that takes one trip, and sometimes it takes multiple trips. After the assessment, we move into design. And again, this is a great opportunity for chapters to be getting input from their community on the design, to make sure that they're trying to solve the needs of the community. After design, it moves into implementation, and this is where most chapters include their education, which is an operation and maintenance manual, which is what you would provide to the community after the implementation, so that it is clear to them how to operate the system that you've implemented and how to maintain it well into the future. And then finally, at least a year after the implementation, a chapter will travel to monitor and evaluate the implemented project, and again, evaluate, see if the system is being maintained and operated by the community and they're taking ownership of it. So as we can see on this chart, I've just tried to insert where I have seen chapters include education into their projects, and how they do it. So as you can see, providing education to our community partners is important and critical in every phase of the project process. The community must be involved in the entire process. I think education is a really great way to get them involved. So every time that we're going into our communities, whether it's for an assessment, an implementation, or monitoring and evaluation, we have the opportunity to develop and nurture our relationships with our local partners. And this is something that we should be focusing on each and every trip. So providing education that not only develops these relationships, but also provides a critical component for the project sustainability, success, and empowerment of the community members. So during the assessment trip, I see a lot of chapters doing water and sanitation and hygiene education. Also, I see chapters teaching community members how to do water quantity testing, water quality testing, and also that continues into the design. During the implementation, we talked about the O&M manual. Obviously, we'll get into that a little bit more later. But this is also a great opportunity to train community members on construction techniques. And then during monitoring and evaluation trip, you really want to focus on that maintenance and operation and reinforcing all of the other educational activities that you've done throughout that project. So during the first assessment trip that your chapter goes on, one of the main goals is to get to know your local partners and to confirm the problem identified by the community. During these trips, chapters are really focused on gathering as much data as possible, conducting household surveys, community meetings, meeting with the local stakeholders, as well as gathering technical data. So oftentimes, especially during a first assessment trip, educational activities are often overlooked. Developing these educational tools can be a very effective way at developing and nurturing relationships to help build trust and rapport with your partners, as well as a means to gather assessment data from the various stakeholders in the community. For example, even a simple WASH activity in the local schools or with the local women's group can provide your team with the opportunity to ask questions about what their needs are and what they perceive the problems to be, as well as the opportunity for the group to ask questions or address concerns in a more personal setting. It's also important to share information about your team and EWB-USA and your long-term plans to partner with the community. And finally, it will open up opportunities for your team to take a multi-pronged approach to trying to solve the engineering problem, which will increase the likelihood of project success. Just understand that it will take time to understand the local history relating to the community, the subtleties in the community, the dynamics that we can't see, and it's really important to take the time to try to understand the community structure, the inter-community relationships, any existing committees and leaderships, as well as the technical capacity of the community. So some of the things that you want to think about on that first assessment trip is to consider what's, as you're talking to them and meeting them, consider the best way to get to know them. Observe if they respond more openly in group settings, or maybe they respond better in household settings. Every community is different. Is it important for them to have social activities to help break the ice? Pay attention to the subtleties of their culture. Are they direct? Are they indirect? How do you ask for something? Do you just ask straight out, or do you have to, start with some small talk first? So when you work with your partners, make sure you're patient in your trip planning, and it's important to dedicate a good amount of time to acquaint yourself with the community members. So, really on that first trip, it's a great opportunity, even if you don't have any educational activities planned, to really get to know and to help develop that plan for education. You can assess people, you can get to know people, figure out who the leaders are, people who would be good resources to help you with your educational work. So EWB-USA is not alone a community development organization, but with our project partners, we need to ensure that the project includes the appropriate educational and training activities. So the training sessions should be aimed at building capacity of groups such as leadership committees, operation and maintenance staff, and individual households. And as I mentioned earlier, these activities really done by or in partnership with the local NGO, your community-based organization, whether that's a water committee, local teachers group, health promoters. The EWB USA teams alone should not be doing training in a vacuum. We want to make sure that you have somebody local to review all the content to make sure that the images and the translation make sense. Sustainability is really about working with systems instead of individuals, such as schools and the administrative level, or with health promoters to help, again, as we talked about earlier, training the trainer approach. So when you use the train the trainer approach, this allows the local trainers to reinforce those concepts. So during the assessment trip, it's really good to be assessing the intended audience of your training materials. You want to make, do you want to look at if they're literate? Do you need to focus more on images instead of text? Can they understand the information that you're trying to present? Again, I can't emphasize enough as having someone local review the educational materials that you create. So here are some examples of posters that were made by a chapter. And so here in the upper one, you can see here, this was the original poster that was made by the chapter. They shared it with their community partners, and one of their local partners said that this was not a good a good poster for a couple of reasons. The first was that the community members would have no understanding of a flying dollar bill, as we show up in option 2 at the top. And another thing was that we represent the community members as these little rats in the lower the lower bottom corner. And then finally, in this community, for their elections, the way that they choose who they want is they use an X. They X through it. So when we view this, when we see an X through it, that's something that we don't want. But in this community, an X is actually saying something that they do want. So because of all those reasons, the chapter went back and revised it, and this lower one is the one that they ended up using. So this is just an example, of why it's important to get your community members, or your local community partners, to review your educational materials. So it's really important to continue emphasizing education throughout every phase of your project. During the design phase, there's still opportunities to engage in educational activities with your partners. Providing design alternatives for review and input from the community is a critical educational piece during the design phase. You want to make sure that they understand what you're proposing and how it's all going to work. Other things that I've seen, the ways that community members can help during this design phase. The first one is collecting data while the chapter is not in country. For instance, if you're working on a water supply project and you're trying to get an understanding of the seasonal variations in the water supply, train someone in the community on the water committee on how to take flow measurements, and then they can continue to take those flow measurements once your team has left. They can also be helping you investigate material, where to purchase it, and the cost. And then oftentimes there are educational materials that the chapter can provide to local trainers to help reinforce the technology of a project. For instance, I've seen a chapter who was working in a community that had a lot of arsenic in their water do a big outreach program with the health promoters, so that the health promoters had the resources and the knowledge of the problem in the area, and were able to share that information with all of the households that they work with, and continue to reinforce those ideas even when the chapter was not in the country. So in this photo here, we see boys in a community reviewing the construction drawings, I believe, of a of a system, and they're trying to of a sanitation system, and they're trying to recreate it as a school project using plastic bottles, styrofoam, and duct tape. And this is a really great way for to be sharing your information and having the kids engaged in what you're trying to do. It's really important during the design phase to build trust, to continue to build trust with your local partners, and to develop those partnerships with local organizations. So always be thinking about ways for you to reinforce the ideas of your program while. And as I mentioned earlier, the main educational tool during the final design and preparation for implementation is the Operation and Maintenance Manual. EWB-USA aims to ensure that our projects include the appropriate educational and training activities as it relates to the future operation and maintenance of an implemented project. The community's capacity to plan for the future operation and maintenance of the project is one of the most important aspects of the project being sustainable. So these photos here are from a biosand filter project in Mexico. The chapter turned their implementation trip into a workshop to teach the community how to construct their own biosand filters. So these are just images from that. And then I've seen some chapters document the implementation with photos and then go back use those photos to create a final operation and maintenance manual for the community members. And I think that's a great idea. So I'd like to just talk a little bit more about the operation and maintenance manual. So every project should include an operation and maintenance manual that provides information about how to operate the implemented system and maintain it well after the chapter closes the program in their community. The aim of this manual should be building capacity of groups such as the leadership committee, operation and maintenance staff, and individual households. And EWB-USA projects require that the community partner, the CBO, and the community members accept responsibility for 100% of all operation maintenance tasks and costs. It is good practice to involve in the design and implementation of the facility those community members who will be responsible for the operation and maintenance of it. It's also good practice to start collecting the operation and maintenance cost allocation that will be assessed to the community members prior to the start of the implementation. And one thing you want to consider is the full life cycle cost of operation and maintenance, including repair, replacement of all parts, and expansion. And the chapter should consider operation and maintenance of the facilities at all stages of project analysis and design. Operation and maintenance considerations will often be the driving constraint during the alternatives analysis phase and the design of the project. As I mentioned earlier, the community must be 100% responsible for the ongoing operation and maintenance of any system implemented with the EWB-USA chapter, and any system that relies on financial or technical resources or equipment that's not readily available to the community will not be approved for the implementation. So it's really important to take these things into consideration, and the operation and maintenance manual is really important, and it should be developed as a standalone document that you can leave with the community that they should be using as their guidance to maintain and operate the system. The implementation trip is also a great opportunity to provide technical training to your community partners. And one of the most common ways to incorporate education in your implementation is to include training techniques such as how to mix concrete, water testing, or repairing existing pipes. Involving the community in the implementation of their project not only provides an opportunity for education, but it will also encourage community ownership of the system. So here, there's just a few photos of this where chapters are training local community members on some technical training. So we have at the top, they're laying rebar for a water tank in Fiji, and below that is a community that's mixing concrete for a school, and this is in Zambia. And then over on the right, you can see a photo of some community members working on repairing pipes, and this was in Tanzania. So once implementation is complete, there's still opportunity to provide education to the community members during the monitoring and evaluation phase. In fact, this is a very critical point to reinforce all of the educational activities that your team has worked on throughout the project. It's a great time to reinforce water and sanitation and hygiene. Remember that the end goal is behavior change and a shift from being reflective to reflexive. And that means, you know, you want these behaviors to be something that becomes natural, not something that they have to think about first and then do. So we all know we wash our hands after we use the bathroom, and that's a reflexive behavior. It's not reflective. We're not coming out of the bathroom and then thinking, oh, we need to wash our hands. It's just something that we do because it's a behavior. Another thing that's really important to remember is that repetition is really important. I mean, think about how we learn. If we hear something one time, we're likely not going to remember that, you know, down the road at some point. But if we're hearing it and it's being reinforced multiple times over the course of years, then there's more likely to be retained and for those behaviors to become reflexive instead of reflective. Remember that we need to be providing resources, so that, you know, this is a great time to reinforce all of the resources that you had provided to any local trainers, such as teachers or health promoters, and also a time to see how the chapter, or I'm sorry, how the community has been maintaining the system after the implementation. And it's also a good time to reinforce maintenance education. So this is a really, really critical time during the educational, while you're preparing your educational materials for your community partners. Finally, because the operation and maintenance manual is so critical for long-term maintenance and for the community, I just wanted to include this slide to go over what we expect to see in a comprehensive operation and maintenance manual. So it should include a clear description of the implemented system, including all components of the system, a clearly defined schedule for the maintenance activities related to the system, anticipated replacement parts, their availability locally, and the costs associated with them. They may include videos of tasks being done, but I think pictures and words are also really good, and video and photos are really important to include in there. It should be illustrative and include photographs of implemented facilities. Oftentimes this requires an update to the draft O&M manual that's submitted before. As I said earlier in that biosand filter example, you know, take photos to document the implementation and then include those photos into the O&M manual. And then finally, the O&M manual should be a standalone document and should be left with the community. Ideally, it would be nice to have it laminated or included with page protectors so that it lasts for a long time. And it's important that the specified maintenance personnel have an opportunity to review and provide feedback on that operation and maintenance plan. You don't want to just hand it to them and assume that they understand everything in it. You want to get their feedback. You want to go over it with them. You want to make sure it works for them, because ultimately they're the ones that are going to be using it. So I'd like to just end today's presentation by going over some tips and ideas and best practices, and then some of the resources that are available. So this slide just has some tips and ideas and best practices, and you can see them here. You know, you always want to pay attention to local context and audience. You can use education to provide transparency of your work, you know, to explain what you're doing to your community partners. It will help you form partnerships with local groups and leaders. You can use it to build trust with your local partners and to seek out cross-sector opportunities. It will help you identify barriers to participation. It's important to really focus on behavior change. You want to make sure you provide resources to the people that you're working with. And it's always really important to try to take a holistic approach. Think about all of the different ways that you can get education included into your project. Finally, here are just some tips and ideas that I've seen some of the chapters that I work with do. Small doables such as tippy taps, conducting workshops for construction techniques, getting water testing done while the chapter is out of country, reinforcing and repetition of water and sanitation and hygiene, connecting with local educators, health promoters, teachers, local university water committees for WASH campaigns, using media such as radio announcements. This was actually something that I did when I was a Peace Corps volunteer, and it actually seemed to work really well. Consider icebreakers, skits and role-playing. I've seen a couple of chapters prepare newsletters for their local partners that they send out on a monthly basis to keep them updated on what's going on and to provide resources for education. And lastly, WASH clubs to encourage peer-to-peer education if you're working in a school or if that's something that might work. I've seen chapters do that, like create a club so that the students are getting excited and teaching each other and reinforcing those ideas. And finally, here are some resources that we have available. Our website has a resources tab, and under here you can find various operation and maintenance manual examples that I uploaded as I prepared this presentation. And then if you're looking for water and sanitation hygiene resources, here are a slew of them to check out. And they have a lot of good information that you can use to bring to your communities to provide as resources as well. And with that, I would like to thank you again for attending. And if you have specific questions, you may reach out to your project engineer here at headquarters. Thank you so much for attending today. And that's all that I have. Thank you very much.